state task force, I do not want to confuse it with the county task force, is the ones that had their meeting and decided to table it for more public input. And then, of course, it went before the council of North Salt Lake, was it Tuesday? And they definitely had a lot of citizens input, and they passed a resolution denying the shelter in their facility. The question remains, and I will tell you this, there needs to be clarification because, like I said, I'm on the county task force, but unfortunately, there has been such a misunderstanding of who's taking what action. All of those folks in North Salt Lake thought it was the county task force, so my inbox and everybody else's inbox was flooded with emails asking us to rescind that decision, but it was not our decision. Yeah, you know, in fact, we don't even know as a task force where we sit right now. So we'll be having a special, well, not a special meeting, but April 9th, we have another meeting, a Zoom call with the legislature to our local legislators to say, hey, give us some direction here. What's really going on here? Because we need answers ourselves. But I'm kind of giving you guys the purview so you know as far as what's going on
Just
so far.
as an intro to that, some of the state legislators will try to throw the county under the bus on that too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's what I mean. There's a lot of finger pointing going on, but in reality, nobody's really come forth and said what really went down. Other than I can tell you that the gal with Switch Point really has taken a hit, and she shouldn't be the one that's being targeted there. She was asked to run the program. She was asked to do this. So I think there needs to be some clarification from somebody in that capacity to clarify that. That's pretty much it for my report, other than I'm going to go ahead and deal with birthday news. So, Mr. Thomas, you requested your baby Ruth.
That's right. That's the only good thing about a birthday.
I think, I know you wanted the grande size, so you're entitled to 2 right off the bat. So, anyway, good.
don't know the last
This is what you get out of Halloween.
Well, like I said, you get 2 to begin
No,
with.
no, I can't.
Yeah.
I go home and my wife smells sugar on my breath.
This is being recorded.
It's okay. It's all right. Okay, so council, what type of updates do you guys have?
Well, I have some CTC updates. The last time we met, we were preparing for the Screenagers film event over at the amphitheater. And we don't have a final report on that yet, but we do believe we had anywhere from 60 to 80 folks in attendance, a number of those youth. I had expected to see more parents, but I saw actually quite a bit of young people, so that was good. The film lasted about an hour and a half, and we had some giveaways. A lot of students signed up to get credit recovery for their attendance. And yeah, it was a good event. We had pretty good turnout, and that just kind of amped us up for more things that we have coming up. On this Saturday, the 7th, from 11 to 1, the LDS Family Services is doing an emergency preparedness fair here in Layton, and so CTC is going to be tabling at that event. And then we'll also be at the fire department open house on September 25th. So we'll be tabling at both of those events and just continuing to spread the word about the coalition and accepting volunteers, encouraging people to participate and letting them know what we're doing. So those are the updates I have from CTC. And then Clint and I were at the league conference. I mean, we were at the conference for the past 2 days, but they did provide some housing material to help us as cities speak to our legislators and kind of show them what it is that we have been doing, and just questions and kind of conversation starters and ways that we can talk to them on our behalf. So I have this, Clint and I were talking, we should give it to our planning folks and so on, since Chad's not here, if I can. There you
Sure.
are. Hi, you snuck in.
That's
So-
Chad without a tie.
I see, a tie and a beard. So I have this for you, and Clint and I thought maybe we could tailor this for Layton City and the things that we've done, so that we can have something to speak to our legislators about in regards to the housing piece. So-
Sounds great.
Yeah, they, just to piggyback real quick on that, they mentioned that West Jordan took their legislators on a tour. I don't know if it's gone around, a little bit, to where the lots are, the units are that are
Waiting to be built.
ready to be built, and sent them all around on a bus tour, and it was fruitful. So, anyway, I don't know, if we could come up with a little report that we could do this similar, not take them on a tour, but come up with some good numbers and say, yeah, here's what Layton's doing.
Yeah, we can do that, really easy.
The overarching message, which we've already discussed here at length, but is basically that the few bad actors tend to carry the message abroad. And so the more of us who are doing all of the right things, or as many of the right things as we can, if we can get that in the face of them, then it can kind of lessen, those bad actors. And also, I think, was it the governor who gave the charge? Or no, it was Cameron. The executive director gave the charge to cities who are not doing anything to go back and start trying to do things, because their inaction affects negatively the rest of the state. The cities and the rest of the state who are trying to do what we can for our communities. So those were, that was the big topic of the conference, and will likely be the big topic of the legislative session. So,
What's interesting is that it's like Groundhog's Day,
correct.
because some of the conversation that you hear from some of the state lawmakers is like, that nothing's changed, right? They haven't passed bills for the last however many years, still the same problems, still need the same things to happen. It's like, it's really like Groundhog's Day. I was actually gonna ask you, Chad, I saw, I think it was in the Sauk Tribune, but I can't remember, I'm trying to find the screenshot that I had. It was talking about, there was some data that said that, I think it was Salt Lake County specific, maybe Salt Lake even city specific, talking about how supply had met demand in Salt Lake City. Is that true?
I don't know about the Salt Lake City data.
I'm
I
gonna,
heard-
cause I'm gonna find that information, because it was basically talking about pricing in big cities, Salt Lake, in the West Salt Lake, Phoenix, Denver, Vegas. And it was talking about how these cities have done, build first, these cities are still NIMBY, and these cities like Salt Lake have really brought down prices, or at least equalized prices, because supply is finally meeting demand. But I wanted to share it with you, because it kind of cuts against the idea that we hear a lot from the Hill about how they don't know about all those entitled units. And in the same manner, there's maybe the supply in some areas is where we want it to be, so.
Yeah,
I'll touch
I
base.
reshared some numbers a couple of years ago that said that multifamily was gonna catch up within, I think it
Right.
was within this timeframe, I
Okay.
think we're there, so that I was familiar with, but, it's not as simple as supply and demand, that's the bottom line.
Mhm.
Supply and demand works really well with widgets and with corn and with things like that, but housing, it's supply for who and demand from who, right? You have people that want to rent out their units as short-term rentals, you have people that want to, that are moving through the housing cycle because they wanna move up, so it's not just a simple, if we build more units, we're gonna reduce prices. If it was, then this would take care of that, so.
Okay, well, and I'll find that, you just screwed me with that thought, so I'll find it and send it to you, because I would like to at least dig in, like, specific on what numbers we have, so.
Anything more?
Just that card, Bettina.
This one?
That one. This was I guess
Checklist?
yeah, the checklist of the top complaints that they're getting from the legislature of things that we should be doing, cities should be doing. So we'll just go, and I think we're probably doing all these things, like, not doing these things, meaning that we've already fixed it. but
Okay.
we'll- Just, yeah, just a couple of cities aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, and
And they're
Huh.
carrying the narrative, basically.
Is one of them a pub case?
I don't know.
They didn't out anybody. anybody,
No, nobody got
but they
outed.
said, you're in the room,
Yeah.
but we're not gonna call you
But
out.
we're not gonna.
The governor said
We're
that.
not gonna
Yeah,
point
yeah, you
you
did.
out.
Yeah,
It's
but
like-
you're here.
That's right.
That's awesome.
And he really
He was
got on a
fiery.
bandwagon, fired hot on the housing and
Yeah, he
the
did.
size of housing and the fact that people
No.
do need to own a home versus a townhouse or a condo.
I got-
It was good. Go ahead.
On a more serious note, we're having a Sub for Santa concert.
In September?
September 14th. And the city obviously is sponsoring it in the respect it's for Sub for Santa for the city. And the Arts Council stepped up and asked if they could do some things. And of course, the people running it said, sure, you can do whatever you want. But anyway, they have done a lot of things to help it out, but it's the 14th. Minimum donation is $5 to get in.
You lowered it?
Huh?
It was $10 last year.
Yeah, I know, but there was a lot of people in Layton that didn't understand what $10 meant. So it was $5, we thought would be easier.
All right.
And especially younger people that may have grown up in other areas like Roy, places. But,
We still have the gold standard in Roy.
yeah, I forgot. But,
So you should have put that.
anyway, so, but all the proceeds go towards our victims advocate department. So it's, we usually raise about $1,000.
And you did a great job last year. There's a lot of,
I mean,
a lot of
it's-
folks, and even the last minute, which,
Yeah, and I think with the Arts Council putting it on their website and their email list may help out too, but I've been gluing fans together for,
you didn't say the time, Dave.
yeah, didn't I? Wednesday? No. It's the 14th of September, and it's at 7:30. And I found out earlier today that maybe we hadn't included the city, Valley, sorry, to let you know, and I talked to Dave about, they're doing some parking work and that, and I said, don't worry. I said, if they're doing it in 2 steps and you can do it farther away and move in, that's fine. If not, it's not like a huge concert, so it's, the effect isn't, it's not like a Arts Council concert where they have, a couple
Sell out crowd.
1,000 cars and that, we usually get 5 or 6 people, so.
Oh, you get more than that.
That's,
Okay.
and that's just my mom.
Anyone else? He's not here, Dave. Come on. Okay, who else anybody else have anything to report? If not, we'll go ahead and move on.
Yeah.
All right, okay, let's go ahead and go to our real discussion for tonight, which, again, this is for, I know Chad's gonna introduce 47G, but like I said, this is one of those discussions that I think is great, so we can kind of be ahead of the game, kind of be thinking about it and understanding what some possibilities are here for our land use. So, Chad, Lon?
Yeah, I'm actually gonna turn the time over to Lon, he's been working
Yeah.
closely with 47G and let him introduce.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we have Chris Metz here from 47G. 47G used to be the Utah Aerospace and Defense Association, and it's 47G. Chris is over this particular topic for 47G, which is basically AAM, which is Advanced Air Mobility, otherwise known as air taxis, otherwise known as drone delivery of goods. And so you're aware, this has been happening for 2 years in Salt Lake County and Utah County for medical supplies and for a product from Walmart. And it's coming, and it's gonna come fast. It's moving at a crazy pace, which Chris will explain. But we appreciate him being here, and this is just to give you an overview of their directive from the governor, and to let you know that we have a potential site that could be great if you decide to build that out. So that'll turn the time over to Chris.
Thanks, and thank you, Mayor and Lon, for inviting me in. I've enjoyed my association with Layton City. We know that you hosted UDOT's Aerospace Conference this year, You hosted a demonstration of the capability of vertical takeoff and landing, the quiet of, they used a helicopter, but they had all the participants with noise canceling headsets that diminished the decibel levels to what an electric vehicle would be. And that was very well orchestrated, and we appreciate you being a leader in this for the state. Chris Metz, 47G. 47G is the Aerospace and Defense Association. We've got over 200 members, from the largest primes to the smallest widget maker in the aerospace and defense industry. 20% of the state's economy is aerospace and defense, and you know as well as I do that you sustain a lot of that, being as close to Hill Air Force Base and to the organization that supports that, as well as being close to the airport, to the international airport, as well as Ogden's regional airport. And you're a leader in this. My background before coming to 47G was many, many years, too many to explain, with the Federal Aviation Administration. So I have the regulator background. I then went to work and partnered with NASA for Deloitte and for L3 Harris. I partnered with the industry on advancing a lot of these technologies. I've been associated with this particular technology for many years, and I know we're at the right place at the right time. And when I look at what's happening with the great eastward migration from the West Coast, they're settling here. I enjoyed the conversation that I heard about housing demand and supply, and I know that that's going to continue to be an issue, as the governor suggested when he announced Project Alta, which is advanced air mobility in this state. He said, we can't go horizontal anymore. We need to start going vertical, and I think that we're right there. I've asked Lon to queue up a CBS report from CBS Sunday Morning 2 weeks ago. Many of you may have seen it, but I want you to take a look at this again so that we have an understanding. A lot of times what we hear is the Jetsons, right? And that still pushes us to the future. I want you to look at this with a little different perspective as it lays out where we are as an industry right now. So, Lon, if you can do it.
Fasten your seatbelt. With David Poe, we're taking off on a voyage to the future. I'm in a chase plane high over Lake Champlain in Vermont to observe one of the world's first electric airplanes. And I do mean chase plane.
I'm full power and walking away from me.
Our pilot is Chris Caputo.
Man, come on. I can't do anything else, David. I don't have afterburner.
For years, you've been able to watch cool-looking electric plane videos on YouTube, created by some of the 300 companies who are working on them. But Beta Technologies in Burlington, Vermont is unique.
I believe we're the only company flying people.
Kyle Clark is Beta's CEO and founder. Its electric plane can carry 6 people and flies 250 miles on one charge.
But every year, batteries get better and better, about 7% per year. That means in 7 years, we'll double that. In another 7 years, we'll double that again.
So you think before you and I die that we will fly on an electric-powered jetliner?
Yes, absolutely.
Traditional airplanes pump out about 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide every year. Electric planes produce no emissions at all, and that's only their first advantage.
One of the things that I think is underappreciated in electric aviation is that it's quiet. You can actually hear the wind noise over the fuselage. You can feel like a bird.
Electric motors are much simpler than jet engines, too. They contain 1/10 as many parts. Furthermore, electric planes cost far less to fly, since electricity costs only about 1/40 as much as jet fuel. But maybe the most impressive advantage of electric planes is that they can do this. These planes are known in the biz as eVTOLs, a clumsy acronym for Electric Vertical Takeoff and Landing. They don't need a runway to take off. but they can still fly forward the usual way.
The propellers on the front are used in both forms of flight. In the hover portion of the flight, they're tilted up. The 6 propellers in the back are just used in the lifting portion of the flight, so the hover portion of the flight.
Adam Goldstein is the founder and CEO of Archer Aviation, an eVTOL company in San Jose, California, devoted to creating air taxis. You'll board the air taxi from a so-called vertiport downtown, and then fly to the airport, for example, to catch your traditional flight. Goldstein says your eVTOL flight will cost about as much as an Uber or Lyft ride.
There's lots of traffic that will congest the roads in between the city centers and those airports. And that happened to at JFK is a great example where it's actually not that far on the ground, but takes a really long time using ground transportation.
Well, this sounds great. Planes that are faster, safer, cheaper, more reliable, and better for the environment. So, what's the holdup?
You're talking about a class of airplanes that did not exist.
Aerospace consultant Sergio Chicuta can tell you what the last hurdle is: the Federal Aviation Administration.
The FAA is a very complex task. They make sure that we can walk onto one of the planes and be in no more danger than getting out of bed.
The need for FAA approval explains 2 strange aspects of Beta's plane. First, it's available with or without its vertical propellers. Clark believes that it will be easier to get initial FAA approval for a traditional plane than one that takes off vertically. As for the second strange thing, Beta's goal isn't creating air taxis.
There are a lot of ways that we can make a meaningful dent on the emissions of aviation before we start to do the thing that everybody talks about, jumping over traffic.
Yeah.
Moving cargo, moving medical, all of those things happen first.
Really? The world's first electric planes will make history by carrying boxes?
Let's point out, cargo room,
Yes,
For consultant Chicuta, that makes perfect sense.
all the way back there.
exactly.
One of the goals from Amazon is to have the majority of their products to be available the same day in large metropolitan areas. What if I can actually take off and land from one warehouse to the other warehouse and move this cargo? I always think of the Beta airplane as the Amazon truck with wings.
Today, every airline has a desperate pilot shortage. That's one reason that most eVTOLs will eventually be self-flying.
In the 2030s, 2040s, there's going to be a very good chance that you're going to walk into an airplane where there's no pilot.
But in the near term, the FAA will require a pilot.
So with your left hand, just slowly pick up the lift lever.
I can actually feel vibration.
The aircraft's gonna lift off the ground.
Fortunately, flying these planes isn't rocket science, as Beta pilot Chris Caputo showed me in Beta's simulator.
I'll fly over the lake?
Absolutely. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna transition onto the wing of the plane.
Okay.
Just push forward with your right hand a little bit, a little forward pressure. So now we're just flying on the wing of the plane. We're literally just sipping energy.
After 20 simulated minutes flying over simulated Lake Champlain, it was time to simulated land.
Touchdown. Thank you for flying Airpogue.
You're very welcome.
We know that you have a choice when it comes to electric aircraft. Actually, you don't.
Beta and Archer have received millions of dollars worth of orders from various airlines and military branches. Both of them, plus an air taxi company called Joby, have already delivered some planes to the Air Force. All 3 companies expect to receive FAA approval and begin flying in the U.S. next year. On the day of our visit, Beta Technologies unveiled its new factory, the first electric plane plant outside of China. Among the dignitaries in attendance, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders.
So it is an extraordinary day, not just for Vermont, or for the country, but I
Look
think
at the tail number on the
aviation
airplane.
and in taking on.
251 UT.
Why Vermont? It seems
I
like all
told
the
them when I
engineers and
visited,
programmers are in
Utah,
Silicon
you've
Valley.
already got our
In
plane.
Vermont, there's a heavy awareness of climate change. And having a group of people working on this that not only are really good at what they do, but they care about the mission, gives them a little extra oomph at 2 in the morning when we're trying to get ready for a flight test the next morning.
You're clear to land.
Among those passionate Vermont employees, former Delta pilot Chris Caputo.
I haven't flown this aircraft in a while, so don't judge my landing too much yet.
Did you take a paid cut to come here?
I did. pretty healthy pay cut. But it's more about the mission that this company is on to decarbonize aviation and do something good for our planet, our country, and the world, and, you know, your kids, my kids, and the next generation.
So 2 highlights, and then I'll ask for your reaction. 2 highlights from that. I don't know if you heard or not, but they're poised to receive their certification under current flight regulations, federal air regulations, next year. You saw them flying. That wasn't a simulation, that was real. The documentation is, and the data is being collected. And the FAA is sitting in a position to offer that certification for at least 3 of those operations by next year. Those companies are ramping up their production lines to start filling advanced orders, which they have already received. And so a lot of times when we hear the Jetsons and things like that, we continue to project way into the future. But the reality is that this is something that's now here. So the governor stood up at Hexcel in South Jordan on May 30th and announced Project Alta and gave 47G a mandate to implement this prior to the 2034 Winter Olympic Games. Not as a novelty of the Olympics, as we might have seen a little bit in Paris, and as we'll see a little bit more in Los Angeles, but as an institutionalized transportation solution for the Olympic Games. And I think that the industry is at the ready to make that a reality for us. Had this been 5 years ago, maybe not. 2 weeks ago, I had the privilege with UDOT to attend an FAA Advanced Air Mobility Symposium in Baltimore. The keynote panel that kicked it off were the top leaders at the Federal Aviation Administration, the head of air traffic, number 2 for aviation safety, the head of NextGen. They sat there, and the last question that was asked of them by somebody already operating in the system, but the last question that asked was, okay, let's project forward 5 years. We come to this conference, and we sit in this session, and we have either you, if you're still in place, or your successors. What will this keynote session at this Advanced Air Mobility be talking about? And they said it will no longer be if and when. This is the regulators speaking. It will no longer be if and when. It will be scalability and efficiency. And so I like to highlight that to communities like yours who are forward leaners, forward thinkers, who want to establish your place well into the future, because they will be in function, they will be in motion. And as you heard the conversation about the batteries, that every 7 years or so we're doubling. You see, a lot of times people will ask, well, how far can these aircraft go? It's not how far, it's how long can they stay in the air because of the batteries. The aircraft can travel forever and ever and ever as long as you've got the battery power. And so the batteries now are upwards of 4 hours in duration. So if you look 7 years ahead, that's prior to the Olympics, we're in an 8-hour capacity. 8 hours of flight time is tremendous. Think about where you are in an 8-hour flight from here. You can be pretty far. So I'll first ask for some reactions and thoughts on that, and then I'll jump into where we are as a state with Project Alta. Anybody have any comments or thoughts?
The certifications that are expected in the next year, are they for air taxi or for transporting?
They're for the
transporting
aircraft
goods?
itself under Part 137, which is commuter in nature. So it is for passenger. Yes. They will also certify it as a cargo carrier, as you saw the beta. They have eVTOL, which was spelled out for you, electric vertical takeoff and landing. And then they have CTOL, which is conventional takeoff and landing. That conventional takeoff and landing certification may come at the earlier side of 2025. And we are in discussions with a service provider, a delivery organization, and Beta. We took a state delegation to all of these manufacturers in the last week and a half. And we've engaged them in dialogue about bringing their operations to the state of Utah and what we need as a state to prepare. And what we want to do is we don't want to chase one singular commercial pursuit. We want to create an infrastructure in this state that's open to all those commercial pursuits. As they standardize charging, as they look to the future, we want the aircraft to be welcome in Utah, so that as we create an operational need, whether that be a first responder need, or a cargo need, or a delivery need, or a passenger need, whether that be a commuter passenger need, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes, or that it's somebody that's onward in their journey to tourism or wherever they're going for a conference or something. That was a great question. Any other?
Yeah, I got a question.
Sure.
I'm thinking about talking about Manhattan, going from Manhattan to JFK.
Mm-hmm.
And then just drone delivery, because you're going from drone to airplane and airplane back down to drone. Air traffic control, what's envisioned? How would you control it?
Yeah, and so often we jump to the end state and we say, wow, that's complicated and that's gonna complicate everything. This will be a phased approach that introduces operations that don't interfere with commercial traffic. And there's plenty of either uncontrolled airspace or controlled airspace that does not impact commercial operations. And it's called UTM, UAS Traffic Management, that will be addressing this. And there are corridors solutions, there are sterile airspace solutions, there are uncontrolled airspace solutions, all of which are actively a part of what we're talking about. As I said in that panel in Baltimore, the head of air traffic was there. That used to be my job at one point, so I get this. I've written papers and published papers on the UTM phase of this. And what we'll do is we'll implement it. And if you think in terms of not the end state, thousands of autonomous vehicles taking off all over the city, if you take it one phase at a time with, let's start with 10 commuter flights across Lake Utah, or from Layton to Salt Lake every day, you can find places that will fit. And then you can see how that operation impacts, if at all, the commercial airspace.
And the FAA wants a piece of that, they want to regulate that.
Yes, they will. They own surface and above.
Okay.
And that's where the certifications are so important. That's why they're going for the commuter, the Part 137 certification first. They'll have to meet all the obligations that exist already in the FARs for flight and operation. They'll be a pilot. They'll operate with flight plans. They'll do what they're supposed to operate into and out of the controlled airspace. And if that means they're gonna then land in an uncontrolled airspace, they'll follow whatever's needed for that.
Just last question on this.
Of course.
Air Force with the FAA, how is, we've got, as you know, we have.
Yes, I know.
It's
Yes, I know.
pretty congested airspace here, and.
It absolutely is. But you'd be surprised how much uncontrolled airspace is still there, and how really well these aircraft operate in lower altitudes. The F-35s want the higher altitudes, or they want the restricted areas, which are already clearly identified. These operations will certainly avoid those when they're operational. But yes, they're a part of this. FAA, even though the DoD is as strong and as powerful as it is, earlier in life, they decided that the FAA still had jurisdiction over all the airspace, which, has been needed in the past.
Thanks.
Then we reallocate, former FAA had, we allocate the airspace back to the military.
Even at its most
complex, this is gonna be easier than what Tesla's already been doing for the last 2 years. It's much more difficult to deal with 99 humans around one smart vehicle than to have dozens of independent electric vehicles. It's a lot more room up there than there is down here.
Yeah, and it's spelled out in very good detail, and if you reach that certification level for that aircraft and that aircraft type and that operation, it's from an agency that has zero tolerance for error, as opposed to massive tolerance for error, as surface vehicles would have. And so it'll be at the ready. Once it receives that certification, it's because it's met that threshold, which is really cool. Great questions.
Thanks.
Yes?
So traffic, there will be an air traffic control for the drones?
No, not necessarily. They will comply with whatever air restrictions
With
there
whatever.
are.
Then, okay.
But if they do enter into the national airspace system, into controlled airspace, yes,
Yeah, that's
they would
different.
use the
Yeah.
existing air
But
traffic
I'm
system.
thinking, it's great, I mean, it's, when you start thinking of what can be done, it's like unreal.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it seems, I hate to be like a downer, but you could create all kinds of havoc.
Well, that's why we'll do this in a structured,
Yeah,
organized, and
because,
phased
I
way.
mean, if I can land on the top of a building, which I could in those,
Mhm.
even if the building's not set up to do it, I could land there.
And there will be both state, local, and federal
Okay.
requirements
I'm sure
that
I'm
govern
not,
that.
yeah, I'm not the only one thinking of this. but
No,
it
no,
just-
no, yeah.
It just seems
Those are
like
the
it-
right questions to
you know,
ask.
You open the door to, anytime you open the door to a lot of good things, you kind of open the door to a lot of bad things.
Mhm.
And so you gotta look at what you're doing. Like I say, I'm not anything special to think of that, that's just.
No, it's your birthday
That's
week.
just something, yeah.
You can say almost
Hey.
anything today.
And he does.
I usually do.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah, that
It's
doesn't-
Yeah, it just makes me a little nervous in that respect.
No, and I'm glad that it does, because that will,
Yeah, that's
that
what
will
it
fill
should
the
do.
gaps.
Right.
You see, because there are 3 things that are gonna be necessary in this next 8 years. And I don't know how my time's doing. We okay for a few more minutes? Do I need to wind it up? There are 3 major things that need to happen. And I don't want it to be a novelty, so 10 years from now, I
Right.
want it to be institutionalized. Whatever it's going to be for the state, I don't want it to be a novelty. I want it, so that brings us back to maybe 8 years from now. But you heard in the video, you're hearing from me and from the FAA, that there's going to be institutionalized and operational electric aircraft.
Right.
It's the network that now we have to create in the state that says, here's what that will look like. And so we partner with Inland Ports Authority, we partner with UDOT, we partner with the airports and with communities like Layton City to find the right network for the demand that we are expecting. Yes?
So I have a question regarding the aircraft itself. So, I mean, obviously, there's only a couple of manufacturers currently, so.
It's, yeah, down from 300 and some down to, what we all knew that would happen. And
Right,
a lot of them
so-
have been bought out.
So do you see that as they would be the actual providers, or is this where this is going to spill off into private ownership in having like, you know, a fleet that they'll then manage or whatever? I mean, I'm just curious what.
You're gonna see both.
Okay.
Or even more models than that. But what we're looking to do is we're looking to create a network that then those operators can step into and say, okay, here's the network that Utah has, that there's operations that go from Layton to Logan, for example, and here's the frequency of those, and here's how that works. Now, if you've got a city that decides, we want a fleet of eVTOLs so that we can inspect, or so that we can carry the right people and start meetings exactly on time because we know they're not sitting in surface traffic, then those, that would be not unlike conventional aircraft today. There are fixed-based operators at landing facilities, and they have to then enter the airspace in a way that is supported by whatever the operation is for that location. And so if it is that you've got a vertiport right out in front here, and you will enter the airspace in the way that that network is structured, and in the timings that support that.
Is there a,
There's major, not only prime defense contractors we know that are investing in this technology, but major auto manufacturers as well, like Toyota, Hyundai.
Yeah.
They're all investing in this technology, so they're making sure it's done correctly.
is there a height limit? I mean. can
Altitude
they-
limit,
uh,
it'll be
altitude?
the aircraft certification.
Oh, okay.
But
I mean,
it's
if they're gonna go
expected
over the
that they'll,
mountains.
yeah, it's expected that they'll operate in valleys or otherwise, but it will be according to the certification for that
No,
aircraft.
I understand there's gonna be rules.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I just wondered, do they have, I mean, could they go over the mountain? I mean,
Some of the aircraft, yes.
oh, okay,
You saw the one over Lake Champlain.
yeah,
They will be impacted as other aircraft are by weather circumstances and winds and
Okay.
things of that nature. However, because of the nature of the aircraft itself, commercial aircraft aren't gonna fly to Park City.
Right.
And they're not gonna fly up the canyon. They're going to, these aircraft, on the other hand,
can, yeah,
should.
yeah, okay.
Infrastructure in Layton City, is that part of the?
Yes.
Just internal discussions, are we
Yes,
moving into the future?
we'd love to.
Is that the?
We would love to absolutely have that dialogue. So let's go ahead and hit my next, unless I've got a clicker in some way. You know a little about 47G. What we're meant to do, what we can do, is we're the public-private partnership piece of this that can accomplish some things that maybe UDOT or some of the others cannot. We can bring people to the table. I can take delegations to these OEMs and let them see firsthand, as we did. So we went to Beta, we went to Supernal, which is Hyundai, to follow up on yours. They're the parent company. We've been to Joby and Archer. So 3 of the ones that they highlighted here. The state of Utah has gone as an official delegation so that we can understand their operating models. Most of them will be selling their aircraft to an entity, and then that operator, and an operator will function it. But Joby is going to do all the operations, maintenance, and everything associated. So each one has a different model. Beta, as you saw, has conventional aircraft. That's where some of the early cargo will take place. We'll use short takeoff and landing runways to use these electric aircraft. 1,500-pound capacities, maybe up to 2,000 as the battery increases. And not every place that we can stop with these aircraft will require charging. As the battery capacity moves forward, we're predicting the flight distance from Logan to here, and I use Layton for that, to be about 18 to 20 minutes with a 4-hour battery capacity. Those operations could start earlier rather than later. If we're worried about the grid, I've met with, and I continue to meet with, and they're partners with us, Rocky Mountain Power. We have electrification companies that are working with us in the coalition to figure out how we do the electrification, the charging stations. We want to be on either side of a fence, for example, so that after the aircraft operations are taking place, maybe city buses and city electric vehicles and such could access and utilize those same resources. And maybe you could even turn it around and make it a retail opportunity as well for other electric vehicles. And the charging capacity and the speed of charging can be very quick. Joby's telling us with their chargers that they can charge to a level to go to the next station in 10 minutes or less, which is not the Teslas that we've been talking about. Go to the next slide for me, please. We have a coalition who are helping guide our decisions here in the state. They include, and are expanding very soon to include a few more entities. But we're trying to get this right. Next slide, please. You saw more than you needed to about this in the video. Please, the next one. And there is a partnership that we're doing with all of those entities there. I've met with the FAA administrator. Not just me, but a delegation from Utah. We've met with our elected officials in Washington, as well as with cities and municipalities like this. UDOT, Inland Ports Authority, Utah Transit Authority, and other transit authorities, as well as every university and technical college in the state. We've got universities and technical colleges who are actually looking to build their own vertiports and calling them vertiport laboratories for that second. So the three things on the bottom that are going to go the entire 8 to 10 years and beyond: infrastructure development, talent development. A lot of good it does to build the infrastructure and bring the planes here if we don't have the talent to maintain them and to replace parts and to maintain the vertiports, et cetera. So colleges and universities are in that unique position of having developed curriculum and coursework and start a throughput of students that will support this industry. And we're working with them as they build vertiport laboratories, for example. Next slide. Here's one vertiport, and you can tell from the background that it's pretty simple. It's a waiting area and a landing maneuvering area. We're going to put together a delegation to go start to visit some of the vertiports which have already been constructed in the U.S. and elsewhere. There is a company in the UK that certified a vertiport in the UK, and it's a turnkey, pre-assembled, prefab capability. And it includes 4 hangars and an elevated takeoff and landing capability, and it has patents that diminish the downstream of the aircraft on their vertical approach. And it has charging capabilities, it has waiting areas, beautiful operations for very low cost. And I mean that sincerely. So there was a study done in Ohio about what the infrastructure, the initial infrastructure would cost for them to start down in advanced air mobility. They came back with initial number of $150 million. And naturally, those who are already associated with the budget say, well, where are we going to get $150 million? And then perspective was brought in when they said, if you look at the cost of surface infrastructure, $150 million would be about 3 overpasses in a surface highway type of infrastructure. So if we're talking about building vertiports all over a metropolitan area or the network in the Wasatch Front for less than $150 million, that's a good investment. A bridge across Lake Utah, $1 billion probably. We don't need it if we've got electric vehicles with the transit authority going back and forth. Does that make sense? Next slide. Here's some of the framework, systems. It's all the things you've been talking about here tonight. Next. This is the size, expectation of the size for the U.S., not the global market, the U.S. market. Next slide. Here's the timeline that we've been looking at. It goes backwards just a little bit. I don't really want this one. Let's go to the next one, see if it's, oh, didn't get it. Okay, so our 4-phased approach, yeah, we sent the wrong slide, Dick. Sorry about that. The 4-phased approach will include a continuation of what Zipline and Drone Up have been doing in the state for the last 2 years. Zipline in a 13-mile radius in South Jordan has been delivering small packages up to 7 pounds via conventional drones for the last 2 years to more than 400 customers a day. And the community's not even aware, except those that are receiving these packages, parachuted into a size no bigger than this table. The one table, not the two tables. They're going to their next generation of aircraft, which will actually land and deliver. We're working with them to expand that capability to beyond visual line of sight. To the aircraft themselves can go up to 160 miles on these deliveries, and we're looking to, not just for zip line, but for any commercial pursuit, create an environment that the community is aware and accepting, and that we can demonstrate the safety of doing that. Also in there is small cargo, or expanding to larger package delivery, up to 50 pounds, and then small cargo delivery, then large cargo delivery. All along that path, we want to start improving first responder capabilities. We want the ability to send a drone to the top of a mountain with a defibrillator if that's what's needed. And eventually, we want the capability of sending a first responder to that scene in an aircraft, and those will be early approvals. Those will be some of the early aircraft approvals that will qualify for those types of operations. We'll start getting into passenger. So if you look from Logan to Provo, what we're looking to do by the end of this year is to identify maybe our top first forward-leaning 10 communities, maybe a few more because we need pairing and such, to start the infrastructure, to start identifying where a vertiport should be located for the future of that community. Usually multimodal is the best approach because then you can get federal dollars as you work on this. In meeting with the FAA administrator, that's exactly what he recommended to us as a state, was where the front runner goes or where bus circulators are planned for communities. Build your vertiports and then look for federal funding. Yes?
What size of footprint are you saying these vertiports should be?
Yeah, so we were with Joby, for example, and Joby said our wingspan is 60 feet. You need buffers for security and lower fences out another 200 yards or so. You're not talking large footprints. Oh, by the way, the FAA has published some initial preliminary standards for vertiports. It's AC 105, Advisory Circular 105. It spells it out and dimensions, and so if you're just a one takeoff, one in and out type of thing, you're a smaller footprint. That vertiport that I was telling you about, it's not a very big footprint at all, and yet can handle 16 operations an hour.
So
which is
for the
pretty
ones
impressive.
that are currently operating,
Yes.
In my head, I got the visual of like Hunger Games where they're dropping, medicine or whatever they're doing. So, you said that there are small packages or whatnot
Yeah, up to
currently
7
being
pounds.
delivered.
Yeah.
And are those being delivered directly to homes? Are they being
Yes.
delivered to another location?
No, directly to homes.
Okay, and so how does that work? They're just in the air and they drop it?
Yes.
Literally?
Yes.
Okay.
A parachute.
But in the future, they're looking to actually have a aircraft
Yes.
land. Those would need to be at whatever one of these other locations are that have vertiport. Is it going to be vertiport to vertiport, or then can they still go to different locations, drop, pick up, do what they have
Correct.
to do?
Yeah, so for the smaller package, even up to the 50 pounds, they'll be able to land in somebody's driveway and offload
Because
and
of the
take
vertical,
off
they
again.
can
Yeah,
be
it's
set.
a small,
Because it's a small drone.
small
Yeah,
drone.
yeah.
So rather than, and then it can land again when they come back. So as it is now, they recapture the drone via a wire, just like an aircraft carrier would have. And it's so precise that they never miss. They took us out to an operation there. We could do that for you as well. We could take you out to one of those operations. Once you see it, it's like, oh, it's not complicated. It's not overwhelming. It's not too loud. It's actually pretty safe.
I was actually at the demo.
Did you come to the one we
I
did?
did, yeah, and I was able to witness the
And it wasn't.
Decimals and everything like that.
Yeah, and it wasn't a big deal. I mean, it was really cool to see, but from a community perspective, it was like, okay, just the way it's gonna be.
So,
Great question. Did I answer it?
you did. Are we talking about today as well the potential location and why you think Layton is a great spot?
We can, if you'd like to, yeah. I've seen what you're proposing out near the new highway, the West Highway. 600 acres or something out there, is that what I'm? 150. So I multiplied it by 5.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah,
We're
it's late.
used- We're used to that.
Yeah, you hit above your weight, right?
That's right.
Yes, that is especially with the development that can follow. I see that as a prime location for several reasons. Once we clear the environmental hurdles, which I've talked with Lon and others about, which will be a part of this dialogue. That operation out over non-populated areas, over the water and over the western side there, makes it a perfect fit for a network of this nature.
And there's no concern about what's just on the other side of that? I'm just asking because the area that we're referring to is also near where the elementary school is, other, homes and whatnot. So what you're proposing is on, well, I guess we're proposing, whoever's proposing it is on the south side of that. But is there, because when we think about, similar to Councilmember Morris's mention earlier about the aircraft and whatnot, like we have APZ zones because of the Air Force Base and where those planes go, and I know with this, you don't need a long runway.
That's correct.
And you could just go up, or
That's
you
correct.
could have, the actual forward mobility. But just talk to me a little bit about the safety, potential safety concerns around folks being in the area.
As we've mentioned, and we'd have to do an evaluation, of course, of the airspace and of the surrounding areas. And because of the nature of the aircraft, the vertical takeoff and landing, those issues, for the most part, as opposed to a helicopter operation, would be mitigated possibly by the actual profiles that these aircraft fly. And whatever those profiles, in coordination with the community, suggested that they do. If those profiles are clearly just vertical, straight up till you get to 1,000 feet, and then nobody even remembers that you're there, and you take off to the west, then that's what it will be. Those things are yet to be evaluated, but there's a lot of flexibility there, and the regulations suggest that those things will be resolved before the operations begin. And your area, yeah, we're still thinking conventionally, and I do the same thing. We're still thinking conventionally, but a rooftop heliport that exists now, Wells Fargo building in downtown Salt Lake's a good example of that. Those could begin those operations right away. They're bigger than a vertiport requirement. They would have to be modified just a little bit. They don't have charging capabilities right now, but they could be a vertistop. And it's in a community, it's in a downtown area, it's all of those things are mitigated. Great, those are the right questions to ask though, because we've got the 3 aspects, right? Infrastructure, talent development, and the last one is community engagement, community acceptance. So all along this path, every chance we get to demonstrate safety, to demonstrate that it's real, that it's coming, we need to do that. And we need to engage the communities in ways that excite them. There was just yesterday or today, there was a news report from The Point about this very issue and about how it's going to be significant to The Point to have a vertiport. Yeah, the entertainment district, same thing. With Larry H. Miller and Major League Baseball, they're going to put a transportation hub, including a vertiport. At least that's the plan.
So I know we need to.
I know,
wrap up,
I've taken much
But let me
too much
ask
time.
you just one last question. So then, to the rooftop capabilities, I mean, is that, that's obviously something we could look at here with, like, I'm just out of my head, I'm thinking, you know, like, Intermountain Health is right
Mhm.
by
Mhm.
our transportation hub as well,
Mhm.
or that would be a partner or something to look at as well. Okay.
Yes, and that's what communities are doing. They're saying, okay, where is our transportation hub? City of Ogden, for example, they're looking to revitalize Union Station, for example. So if there's a vertiport there, and if the front runner's there, if the city buses and everything are there, why not make that a point destination? Even offload the passengers right through Union Station, which could happen. So.
One, forgive me if you did, one partner I haven't heard is Rocky Mountain Power or Power
They were
Grid.
on the slide.
Were they on the slide? Okay.
Yeah, and I mentioned that we are partnering with them.
Okay, good.
Met with them, as a matter of fact, just yesterday, in a long meeting outlining, and they recognize the challenges, not just of this, but of data centers being created all over the state, of other high capacity demands, as well as the Olympics themselves. As they go back to 2002, one of the biggest issues with the games of 2002 was the grid and
Yep.
access to power. Even Eccles Stadium, which already existed leading up to that, couldn't meet the demands of all the TV stations and the clocks and timers and everything that was placed into there, and the heaters for the Tabernacle Choir that were needed in the stands as that happened. And so they get it, and they're partnering with us. It's a great question.
My only other question slash comment was about the cost, and how you mentioned these type of operations could be, you know, the cost of an Uber. I think, you know, when you're talking about exciting people, low cost excites people, but this also seems like it could be something seen as exclusive. So then you would have those who would feel like, you know, I'm able to do this, but the regular public is not able to do this, and so, you may not be able to answer this now, but how would you be able to ensure that the cost is truly the cost, and that folks aren't ballooning that up so that, you know, well, I can ride this because I'm an elected official, but, you know, you cannot because you don't have access, those types of things.
Oh, I love that you asked that question. I'll try to answer it quickly and get out of here. We have fun. And that is one of the most important delineators between us and many of the other states that I talked about that are pursuing a particular commercial pursuit. We want to bring the price of that, and the OEMs that we've been meeting with are working on the same thing. How do we bring the price point per seat mile down to where the common, that's not the right word. Where you and I, the consumer, any consumer has a choice. Take my surface vehicle or take one of these. We want the bus pass that's in their hand, the bus ticket, the monthly pass to work on front runner, the buses, and the eVTOLs. We want a UTA sticker on the side of some of these aircraft, and we want to bring it down to the commuter level. We absolutely want to. So, and there's a precedent, there are precedents set for this all over, not in aviation, in surface. I love the model that is the Puget Sound in the state of Washington. So for those who are familiar with the Seattle area and the peninsula on the other side, you know the map that the Puget Sound cuts down and splits it in half. So you could live in Bremerton or Silverdale, you can drive 3.5 hours across the Tacoma Narrows Bridge if the traffic's good, and you can live in Bremerton and work in Seattle. Or you can make the choice through subsidized infrastructure, through subsidized ferry system. You can make the choice to take the 25-minute ferry. It's still an option, but the price point is to where it is a choice for every consumer. And that's the model that we're working here. And that's where, if UTA has a network of aircraft going up and down the state, and that's what we're looking to do, is to offer them that opportunity to say, okay, today I need to be at that meeting, I can take it, and it's reasonable, and the price per mile is reasonable. Does that make sense? Very similar to what they were talking about from Manhattan to JFK. It's miserable. I've taken that trip. It's absolutely miserable on the surface. And you see those helicopters out there and you say, well, that's for the rich, and that's why the stereotype of these is, I'm gonna turn in my helicopter keys for one of these new fancy, electric aircraft. We wanna dispel that. We wanna make it available. And if it's gonna truly be a transportation solution for the Olympics, then it absolutely needs to be that any consumer has that choice.
Very good.
Thanks.
Yeah,
I can
we
come back
appreciate you.
anytime. Thanks for your time. I know how valuable it is. And you're away from your families. Thank you for that, really.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
We really
We'll
appreciate
see you
it.
again. Thanks, Lon.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, futuristic. That's why I figured we might
Well,
as
not
well.
as futuristic as you think.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, close to our meeting? Okay, I guess we do have another item on this agenda, which means we need to go into a closed session, so I would look for a motion to do so.
I moved that I go into a closed